Give her a big round of applause, Naz.
Thank you very much for inviting me to give a speech to you today. It's a real privilege and honor to be able to be here and speak with you all. Thank you very much for the introduction as well. I hope that I can live up to the expectations that have been built. I'll try my best, but please forgive me if I don't. So, for the past few decades, I've been studying the factors that have been contributing to vulnerability to anxiety and depression, and what we can do to possibly alleviate the vulnerability to emotional disorders by targeting those factors. So I'm very interested, as you just heard, in mechanisms. How do things work, and why do they work the way they do? So after active treatment for cancer diagnosis, we are basically told to go and live our lives. We're cured now. The world is your oyster. Expectations to conquer the world run high. In contrast, how we feel might be quite different. We may feel alone and scared. We may feel like crying. We may feel tearful. And we can question ourselves as to why are we not happy? Why aren't we over the moon? Why aren't we running the marathons or climbing the Himalayas? There is an issue that's quite prevalent, and most of us may not be able to identify with ourselves. The new normal is quite ambiguous and vague. You may feel like you're tired, you're fatigued, you can't concentrate, you suffer from brain fog. You may not be able to go back to work as you would expect to. Your confidence has taken a hit, your self-esteem has taken a hit. And of course, there's always the fear of cancer recurrence, cancer return, or progression of cancer if we haven't completely got rid of cancer. What if it comes back? What if it haunts my life? What are the implications? How am I going to cope? So there's a tsunami of thoughts that are running through our minds at the time when expectations are running high for us to go and do well. So the literature, the research literature shows that cancer is a risk factor for psychological morbidity. What you see down on the left side is a list of all the possible issues that we may be experiencing after a cancer diagnosis. And to be honest, this list isn't exhaustive. There is a host load more emotions that we may be feeling that are related to these. Now, the quite sad thing is that over 70% of individuals do not receive the psychological or psychiatric care that they deserve as a consequence of these challenges of the impact of cancer. And this has huge implications for quality of life. It has huge implications for survival as well, as I will highlight. So what I want to say, unfortunately, the cancer care pathway does not include a strategic attempt to provide continued psychological support to equip us with the resilience-building tools that we may need to rebuild our broken lives post-cancer diagnosis. Now, the literature shows that women with a breast cancer diagnosis are at a 42% increased risk of anxiety and depression, which affects risk of cancer recurrence and cancer-related mortality significantly. This was a meta-analysis that included results from hundreds and thousands of patients. We can't take these results lightly. This is a big cry for us, for stakeholders, for policymakers, to include psychological support, psychoeducational programs to help us rebuild our lives post-cancer treatment. The risk factors for this vulnerability were age, and social support. The younger you were, the greater these risks. The lack of social support, the greater these risks. This paper was published shortly after the meta-analysis that I mentioned, and it's linking self-reported psychological distress with expected survival function. Okay, now we're talking about psychological state being linked to clinical outcomes. You can see the curves, the survival functions, though, that they're poor self-rated psychological health, poor survival, and then you've got good. So there's a good correlation between these two. Now, when we are going through the trauma of diagnosis and when we are coping with the continued side effects of treatment that may persist for many years after active treatment, we are cognitively affected, okay? And there is good amount of evidence to show that cancer and its treatments impair brain structure and function. Structure meaning grey matter, function the white matter, the plasticity, the brain plasticity we need to adapt, to learn, to adjust, to build resilience. So we are affected at a fundamental level. And these effects can sometimes sustain themselves for many years post-active treatment. It's not like, well, it's been 5 years since you've been diagnosed. You're still complaining about the problems you have at work, that you can't follow conversations, that you switch off after 20 minutes. I know I do. And it's been 11 years. Now, being a cognitive neuroscientist, I was very interested to see how cancer and its treatments affect cognitive efficiency. So cognitive efficiency is like brain efficiency, right? So if different parts of the brain are speaking to each other in an efficient manner, we're able to do our tasks better, right? As a consequence of the impairment that cancer brings upon our brains, this efficiency is reduced. And because of this reduced efficiency, we experience this brain fog, memory lapses, lapses in attention, forgetfulness, etc., etc. So there's a lot of neuroimaging evidence to support compensatory effort. But I'm going to show you a study where we looked at compensatory effort in a more detailed manner. This finding comes from a very recent paper that looks at adults and adolescents and younger adults. There is a correlation between self-reported cognitive dysfunction and self-reported psychological distress. I mean, some of us may think, isn't this intuitive though, right? Does it make sense? Why does someone need to prove it? We need research to verify our observations so that the government, the medical teams, anyone who wants to care about us can take note. Unless it's verified through research, whatever you say may just be in your head. Or the fact that you didn't attend the 7th CBT session, or, you know, go and sort yourself out, stop moaning, there are so many other people in worse conditions than you, right? No. The research is important. So, this shows, in fact, in this paper, the authors argue very strongly for implementation of programs that can help adolescents and younger adults through their survivorship post-active treatment. Why is this particularly important for us as a community? Because we have more to lose because of cancer, right? Femininity, energy, younger, ambitions, marriage, partnership, work, they can all be, they say take a perspective. Right, I am taking a perspective, but I do want to have a partner. I do want to have children. I'm taking perspective, but I've always thought about, becoming that medic or becoming that lawyer or opening my own shop, my own store. But now I may not be able to. So let's see how this works, this relationship between the distress and the cognitive, right? So anxiety and depression weigh heavy on the brain. What you see there is a very simplified version of the brain from, do a vertical cut down there, and you see that. Now, you see the arrow, the yellow bidirectional arrow. So if I can, I can't point, but that's fine. It says amygdala. So that region is supposed to be like the limbic system, and amygdala has a very big part in emotion processing, right? So when I'm anxious, my amygdala's firing. Danger, danger, right? Now, when we're emotionally overwhelmed, what happens is that the prefrontal cortex up there, where you see the light purple, tries to regulate, down-regulate, normalize all the activities that's coming from the amygdala, hippocampus, and other surrounding parts that are involved in emotion processing, right? Now, when you are susceptible to anxiety and depression, or you've gone through a trauma, cancer diagnosis, etc., the prefrontal cortex takes a backseat. It refuses, or it becomes sluggish not to regulate that, because there are all those concerns in our head, the worries, the rumination, had I had more broccoli, or the kale, or the lemons, or had I done more exercise, all of this is running through our heads. And so these issues preoccupy our very special resources in working memory, right? Like the online memory that we have. So working memory is very active when I'm speaking to you guys, right? I need to be monitoring what I'm saying. And so this kind of connection, this connectivity between these systems was a big part of the work that I did prior to my cancer diagnosis back in 2013. We published the attention control theory of anxiety and a similar one for depression. And we argued that emotional vulnerability tips this balance in favor of stimulus-driven processes, which are those I'm in danger, anxiety, etc., at the expense of the prefrontal cortex becoming inefficient and taking a backseat. Now, as a result of this, the brain is very smart. So what it does, it doesn't kind of say, okay, well, I'm doomed and gloomed. I'm not going to sit for this exam because I know I'm going to fail. No. It tries to recruit from a wider network so that it can get the job done. And that's what we say compensatory effort. It compensates. This is inefficiency. Now, imagine you have to recruit and compensate every time you want to go to work. Over time, what happens to the brain? Burnout. I'm tired. I don't know why I'm so tired after 15 minutes or 10 minutes. The brain is susceptible to burnout because it's lost its efficiency. So this is a model just to kind of describe what's happening. So when we worry, for example, is cancer coming back? Or, oh, I should have, it was that, too much alcohol, or maybe I had less broccoli, or I had more greens in my diet. I remember I was told after my cancer treatment, can you still have Coke, Diet Coke? Why drinking Coke? Oh, I'm sure it's not, I don't think it's good for you. So these compete for attentional resources, and they impair what we call attention control, the efficiency that I just talked about. This increases susceptibility to distraction. Remember, so when this happens, have you been in a situation where you think, you know, I try to focus and but then I got an intrusion, and then I thought about all my failed relationships, and then what we're having for dinner, so the distractibility goes up, and this puts a dent in the system even more. So when I'm in enhanced susceptibility to distraction, what happens? I worry about my performance. Oh, I can't follow them at work, in the meeting, and people are looking at me like, she's not here. So brain efficiency is compromised. We did a study to document this in women with breast cancer who'd finished active treatment. They'd all undergone chemotherapy. And what did we find? We found that they asked a very simple task. Say, indicate on the keyboard if the middle letter is matching the ones that are flanked to its size or not, right? On different trials, you just have to say yes if it's matched or no. In terms of error rates, they did not differ from the non-cancer controls. But when you look at the brain, they are doing what? They're recruiting from a wider network to get the job done. This shows a direct indication of processing inefficiency. Now, I'm going to say that I want to emphasize that younger women are at risk. This, at least in the context of breast cancer, social support and poorer cognitive function are two of the biggest predictors of psychological distress, especially depression, in metastatic breast cancer, when breast cancer is metastasized to other parts of the body. And we get loads of reports that we are quite, struggling at work. We have impaired workability. Workability is important. Why? Because I want to contribute to society. I want to look like a competent mum. I don't want to feel like I'm a vegetable and not being able to do stuff. So, the question then arises, we're not all doomed and gloomed. The brain is very smart. If you capitalize on neuroplasticity-induced change as a function of training your brain using cognitive exercises and other methods that I'll touch on, then you are in a good position to protect yourself in the face of emotional vulnerability escalating. So, you must have heard there are loads of stuff out there, different kinds of therapies and things that people advocate. But, sometimes I think we are blessed. We're in an era that there's so many different kinds of therapies. Yet, according to the World Health Organization 2023, anxiety and depression are the biggest disabilities worldwide. Why is that? We must be doing something wrong. I don't know what we're doing wrong, but I can offer some other alternative solutions. So, adaptive cognitive exercises, mindfulness meditation, and paced breathing exercises. This is something that we've got into recently, and there are promising results for this. They affect the cognitive emotional system in the brain, and they improve the brain-heart connection. I'll talk about the brain-heart connection in a moment. Now, not every brain training exercise is great. No, many big brain training companies have been sued millions for lying and saying that our brain training exercise improves work performance when they actually haven't been able to show it. A particular training that we've worked on for many, many years and showed its neural efficiency improvements as a function of training is this training called the adaptive dual MBAC paradigm. It's dual, you're doing two things at once. So it's really pushing that boundary, right? You need to monitor the position of the grid and a letter spoken at the same time across the task. Say if it matched the one previously or the one previous to that. As you get better, the task gets more difficult. That's why it's called adaptive. Anyone who wants to try this program, I'm very happy to give you a link. Now, across time, for example, you're training 20 minutes, half an hour every day, you should see an improvement on the actual task. So the task gets difficult and you get better, right? You're managing to do the more difficult parts. But this isn't enough. I want to see if that improvement that's happened here translates to my everyday life. Am I able to face my boss? Am I able to spend 20 minutes longer at work? So we've run a number of studies, countless, I can't say how many, where we've followed a protocol like this. So prior to training, there's an assessment, then you're in either a control group or you're in the training group, and then you're assessed afterwards to see, as a result of this training, how you have changed on those measures that were pre. Now, why is there an immediate and follow-up? Because I want to see if the change is sustained or were they just temporary. I want to see if maybe something took longer to come out, initiate, maybe delayed changes. So in one of the very first kinds of interventions that we published, this back in 2018, in psycho-oncology, where we followed women up until 15 months post-active, post-training intervention, and we saw sustained reductions in the training group and no changes in the control on the measures that you see there. We put this training together with mindfulness meditation, and you see that mindfulness meditation also hits on the same circuits, the same, neural mechanism we found compared with control across time. This study was only done up to 6 months post, right? Not like 15 months like the other one. And in a mixed methods intervention, we thought we would look at the effects of this training on workability in women who showed and reported cognitive difficulties at work. So they were recruited, and these are women with breast cancer diagnosis, by the way, but the mechanisms are the same. It doesn't need to be different for any other cancer diagnosis. We all go through the same trauma. I focused on breast cancer because, personally, but also we got funding. But generalizable. You saw the correlation between cognitive dysfunction and psychological distress. That wasn't just breast cancer, that was across cancers. So, now, what did we find? This graph might look a bit difficult, but I'll explain what it is. So, what you see on the left is a cognitive task that measures working memory capacity. So the ability to, perform the task at hand well, without resisting distractibility, inhibiting irrelevant stuff when I need to, multi-shifting attention when I need to. What you see from the x-axis up is a gain from training compared to pre. So post versus pre measures. Much more improvement in the training, the dual MBAT, compared with control. Now, what you see on the right is a measure of distractibility. Anything that's below the line shows a massive reduction in distractibility. Anything above shows distractibility. So compared with control, so what we're seeing is that when you perform another task, that transfers. The improvement on the training transfers compared with control. Now, what did people, and this reductions in depression. This is pre versus 1 year follow-up. We followed up for 1 year. Pre versus 1 year follow-up. Anything below the line shows a reduction post versus pre. It's so important to see what people say about your intervention. We get them to do questionnaires, tasks, brain, activity, measurements, etc. These are some of the things that participants said. At 1 month, you can, and then we've got at 6 months as well, you can see on the slide the improvements that they are mentioning, which we don't see in the control group. So like, mindset has changed. I think I can work on a Thursday more. We also saw things like, I'm actually thinking about doing the MSc I always wanted to do. I think I'm more confident now. I can face the challenges. At 6 months, again, these were sustained. Women didn't come back to say, well, actually, you know what, I think I'm back to square one. Now, what I call the black box is missing. We see these changes, but are they only due to the training? Not just me, any person who does training interventions, we still don't know. What is it that consolidates these effects? Is it because I feel more confident? You know what? I've introduced new things in my life now. What are the behavioral things that people engage with that help sustain these effects across time? It's all like a chain reaction. So the training helps the brain to get smarter in a way for choices, right? Choices that help consolidate the training effects. But there is no study that has measured any one of these. Maybe behavior, maybe took up more exercise, maybe changed my job, doing what I love. We don't know. And that's why, I think there's a black box here. We need a bit more information. So the final thing I want to talk about is the breathing, the paced breathing exercises. So I wasn't very hopeful in this technique. The PhD student, or prospective PhD student, who came to see me, she said, Naz, she's a clinician, and she said, Naz, I really think this is going to work. I've read some papers, and there's this thing called heart rate variability. Of course, I knew what heart rate variability was, but she was linking it to the breathing. Now, what's heart rate variability? The name says variability in heart rate. So the variability, beat to beat, the more variable the interval of beat to beat heart rates are, this has been linked to better functioning, resilience, coping, adjustment, better health, better cardiovascular health. Wow, the literature was booming. So I thought, okay, how can we manipulate this heart rate variability? The greater it is, the more resilience I'm expecting. The lower it is, more links with psychopathology. So heart rate variability can be manipulated through something we know called the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is a nerve that connects the brain to my heart. When I'm scared, what happens? my heart starts beating, right? Signals to the brain, actually, there is theorists diverge here. Some, like myself, says the brain signals to the heart. Others say the heart signals to the brain. But anyway, go with it. The brain immediately says, "Oh, there's danger." The amygdala starts firing. I need to prepare for a run, fight, flight, or freeze. It's not just fight, flight. Sometimes you freeze. And then it signals to the heart, pump, pump. Oxygen to the blood, and so a whole sympathetic nervous system goes on overdrive until this conflict has been resolved. Now, if in psychopathology this connection is faulty, the brain and heart are not talking to each other according to situational demands. You can normalize this, balance this connection using paced breathing. So, paced breathing with a 6 breaths per minute is supposed to be the golden. A normal rate is 12 breaths per minute. So we did a study, a longitudinal study there. So if you start from the left, we had 3 groups. One group who trained for the 6 breaths, another for 12, and a waitlist control. They did this breathing with biofeedback. So they were training. You know, you see that circle there, the green thing. So when the green lines went up, you know, oh yeah, I'm doing it right. With the 6 breaths. So it was training you to breathe better, deeper, 6 breaths. By the way, mine was really good to start with. I didn't have to train. I was saying, and then my daughter, who was sitting next to me, she said, "Mommy, you haven't pressed the right switch." Press the right switch. So a company called HeartMath, who produces these, we got to collaborate, and they helped us a lot with the analysis. So what happened? This is very hot off the press. The paper is just about to get submitted, so I haven't reported on all of the effects. Now, what you see there is baseline heart rate variability, HRV, baseline heart rate variability, for the group that we did the 6, for the group that did the 12, and the waitlist control. What we see is an improvement in baseline heart rate variability in the 6 beats per minute group compared with the others. Now, baseline heart rate variability is important. Why is it important? Very important, baseline, when you're sitting doing nothing. Because when I'm sitting doing nothing, I'm actually not doing nothing. What's happening in my brain? My brain actually is quite active. If I'm anxious, I'm worrying. If I'm prone to depression, I'm ruminating. So the default mode network in the brain is actually quite active. And it should be. The same with heart rate variability. The more variable, the better. At baseline is very important. So I'm just going to show you 2 graphs for anxiety and PTSD. The beauty of research, honestly, you make sure you randomize participants to groups, and yet you find such differences at baseline. Honestly, this has happened more than once with me. But there are marked reductions in anxiety and PTSD. By the way, when we say PTSD, it's post-traumatic stress symptoms. This isn't a scale that can classify you as to have a PTSD, like a disorder. This is not a clinical diagnosis. So reductions. Now you can see the 12 beats also reduces, but the reductions are bigger in the 6. So what can we take away from what I've said? Well, challenge your brain, challenge yourself. You know, it's the first step that's the hardest, but when you do manage to put that first step, we do manage to finish that block of a 2 back or 3 back as the task gets more difficult, the joy, the feedback that the brain gets because of that sheer joy is next to nothing. So challenging yourself, even if it's sometimes 2 steps forward, but 1 step forward, 2 steps back, is important. Challenge your brain. This is very intuitive, but actually we don't do much of it. Put time aside for your mental health. Don't put your mental health aside. You know, I was thinking the other day, I woke up and I felt like I'm 90. I can't. What did I do yesterday? And I didn't do much. Why am I like this when I wake up? We expect our bodies to serve us in any possible way we want. Yet, this here drives it all. We take our brains for granted. We can't do that. We need to attend to them. And by attending to them, I mean everything about our brains. The good and the bad, the anxiety, the depression, the sadness. Sadness is a very important emotion. You don't put sadness in a box it up there, I need to get on with my work. It's raising its ugly head sometime in the future. Sit with your emotions, and that's what I've kind of said. It's so hard to do that. I'm no good example. I work myself to death. Why? Because I know if that I have an hour or two, time for those to come. But that's when the time we need to listen to them. Making time for those. All our emotions are important, all of them. Not just the positive, happy-go-lucky, confident, toxic positivity we call. Understand why an effect is the way it is. How does mindfulness work? How does the training work? How does relaxation work? How does swimming work? I don't know. Understand how. Because when you understand how, you want to do it more. I was actually saying this in a university after a talk, and there was an engineer, I was no bad word, no, I'm not saying any. He said, I'm an engineer, I don't care how things work. If they work, they work. Good for me. Okay, but how can you make it work better? If you don't know how it works, you don't know how to make it better. If you don't know your body, how can you make yourself better? Be your own advocate. It's so easy to slip through that net. Been there, done that, got many, many t-shirts. Oh no, it'll be okay. Oh no, that, no. We have to be our own advocate. You know, the medical teams have so much to deal with. Educate, everyone is struggling. So we need to be our own advocate. Also, people want immediate effects. Quickly, tell me. You know, this isn't a drug that you take. Even antidepressants take 2 or 3 weeks to work. We need to be patient. The brain needs time. Immediate effects, I'm not so keen. What we say in science, slow science is the best. The ones that give you the effects quickly, no, oh, alarm bells. Slow pace. I just want to say a little bit about BRIC. This is the penultimate slide. I know I'm going over full. Yeah, I'm very proud of BRIC. BRIC was set up with an n equals of 1 myself, and I thought maybe I could open it to the, Oxford area where I live, and then now with 2,000, just under 500, 2,500 women with either metastatic or primary breast cancer. We have a support network, and we have a website. If you want to go to the website, check us out. If you know anyone affected, we're open to all women, any age. Men also get breast cancer, and we should not be sidelining. However, the rate's much lower, so 56,000 cases a year, women, and 400 men. However, I'm not belittling, there's no comparison. You don't compare. Every cancer is its own cancer. So, yeah, I've talked a lot. So I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. We have got a little bit of time for questions, if you're happy to stay on. Hopefully you've all been thinking of questions to ask. We've got a roaming mic, have we? Oh. She's like, yes, we do. We do have one. Fab.
Thank you so much. I have two questions. I don't know if you want to go through both of them, but the first was that first slide. Was it Wang et al. That looked at linking the rates of anxiety with actual recurrence and mortality? Is that right? Sorry.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so are those mechanisms understood? How does anxiety...
Very, very good.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's the first one, and if you've time, the second was about nutrition and brain health and or brain function. Do you have any thoughts or ideas on that?
Nutrition is not my expertise, but I do know that it's becoming very popular in oncology. I mean, I do to some extent, believe me, that I believe that what you eat is what you are, that is so important. But there is, there's a debate about it. Some oncologists actually know it's not. But eating well helps your immune system, helps you as a person, and there is some indication, I mean, the effects are very small, but that, having more greens, I'm talking about greens again, the broccoli and the kale, and with the antioxidants, they do help. I don't know of any convincing relationship between what you eat and brain power or brain efficiency. I don't think it's been done before. Now, not that there is, just because it's not there doesn't mean it might not be true. Sometimes it's so difficult to get funding to do those types of studies, and they're difficult to be carried out in a controlled way. But eating well just helps you as a person, and our brain and our heart's part of us, Now, the question was about mechanisms. That paper alludes to the following. Again, they talk about the vagus nerve, the problems of brain connectivity. Yeah, so, and the hormonal influences as well. So the endocrine system, so we can't look at just one factor, a number of things give rise to the effects of anxiety and depression on, wear and tear of the brain and wear and tear of the body. So now there are genetic predispositions, so we can't rule those out, but more and more findings show that the genetic predispositions don't work on their own. It's what do you call it, the gene bioenvironment interaction. So you can be carrying, or you can have a genetic mutation for anxiety, for example, but if you're not in a right environment to trigger a behavioral expression, you're not going to suffer high levels of anxiety. So, yeah, exactly. So we can't rule out the independent contribution of either gene or environment, but more and more researchers are looking at their interaction. Actually, there's a very famous study by a group led by, I can't remember his first name. I think I do, Jonathan Casby in Australia, where he did a longitudinal study on depression. And he showed very clearly, actually his original study was published in Science in 2003. He showed very clearly that number of bad events, number of stressors, etc., moderated the effects of genetic predisposition to depression and reported depression. So, yeah.
Thank you. We've got someone over here? Yeah. And then we'll come to you next.
Thank you very much. It was a wonderful talk and very informative. I just wanted to ask if you could give a couple of top tips for maybe simple things that we could employ to tactics, or should we be doing brain puzzles? When you talk about helping, what simple things can any person going through cancer treatment or finished cancer treatment pick up? We can look something up on the internet, puzzles, or what any top tips for that type of thing?
What I suggest is that maybe whilst you're going through treatment, do not engage in those challenging exercises once you're after treatment. And we made sure that everyone was at least 6 months after treatment who took part in training. There's a lot of adjustment to be done then, and there are also trials to show that whilst in treatment, patients have very low engagement with intervention. Not any of my studies, because I have not looked, but other studies as well. So we're going to let ourselves be. Yes, all kinds of challenges, the puzzles, the, I don't know, the Sudoku, all of those. However, what they lack is a scientific explanation for their design, or how that particular design can. So when we adopted the adaptive dual MBAC, many modifications were done to this training to get the optimum results. And we've tried and tested them on, people with clinical depression, people with high levels of anxiety, people with PTSD who couldn't face driving, for example. I mean, quite a lot of my research isn't just on breast cancer, it's other populations as well. And I would find one that you find yourself challenged, but not too difficult, not too easy. The beauty of this training, I'm just advocating it, right? It's actually free. The beauty of this training is that it works with you. So if there's a puzzle, or I mean, sometimes I give up after the second one. I just can't do it, and then I feel bad about myself. But also some very other simple things there are. So you go to work. We always take the same route. Take a different route. There's a trick for the brain, and that's novelty. It's anything that the brain likes to habituate really quickly. Because why? Because we like, to be happy, comfortable, But it needs a, restart, recharge. Anything, even small things. I try and challenge myself with one small thing every day. And I also do those exercises myself. Not just before when I want to see my boss. So new things that the brain wakes up, it starts generating new connections, new synapses, and so it could be anything you like, but I can't say do this, don't do that, but what I do know has worked is that training. So, yeah.
Just ask, because some people here do have like incurable cancer or stage 4 cancer. So you said, you might be in treatment forever.
All the time,
Yeah. So what would you recommend there? That kind of, that novelty thing, like trying different things every day, or are there other puzzles you might try?
Yeah, I mean, this kind of training or the paced breathing would work very well, actually, for, people with metastatic disease, incurable disease for their entire life.
Right.
So, there's no reason why it shouldn't do. It might be a bit more tiring, but you don't need to complete half an hour every day, for example. Do 15 minutes. But then don't beat yourself up because I didn't do half an hour. I'm not that good. No, I'm great if I can do 10 minutes.
So is my 67-day Duolingo streak helping my brain? Maybe.
Yes.
Yeah, learning French. Okay, 10 minutes.
New stuff, but there's also an issue here that, persistence is key. So we may be motivated, but if we can't persist, and consistency is important as well. And sometimes difficult to find the motivation, Relaxation is as important as challenging. Yes. Relaxation is as important as challenging. And when we talk about relaxation, yoga, Pilates, relaxation exercise actually are not that easy to do. Your mind starts, if I cannot tell you the number of times I get distracted when I'm doing relaxation exercise. But we're not there to judge, and it all helps, it all helps the brain.
There was actually someone...
Sorry, one question. Go over here and then I'll come back over there.
Thank you. Duolingo, I'm on that too. That's made a real difference, actually.
Really exciting.
What was I going to ask now? Oh, yeah. Okay. I was interested the attention and control theory of anxiety bit. Kind of neurodiversity. Those are sort of things that end up, overthinking. That's kind of part of a process of that anyway. Then when you stick kind of cancer on top of, is there any research, and in any of the research, do you monitor for that? How do you know if, maybe people are neurodiverse? Is there a difference to how they respond to these things? Does that make sense?
How neurodiverse... There has been quite a bit of literature on that, neurodiversity and attention control. The problem is that there isn't a particular theoretical understanding as to what the expectations should be. But my hunch would be that, neurodiverse individuals are probably better on attention control and brain efficiency, like bilinguals, for example. There's a lot of research out there to show that they have an advantage. Also, for example, I'm going to mention autism. Autism is associated with very good perceptual functioning in the brain. So that's a very, good benefit that autistic individuals have, which we need to harness rather than, they, their capabilities may not be in the, the standard framework that we want to kind of box everyone in, but they have their own perks, their own strengths. So
as part of your study, would it have picked up if there were people taking part who were neurodiverse, and if there's much difference in how they respond to others? Right.
No, because we haven't, in the context of cancer, you mean?
Yeah.
Or just general?
Yeah, particularly in the context of...
No, we've often... one of the things that we've always not seen, very interestingly, is that the time since diagnosis has never really moderated any of the effects we see. People say, well, the longer you are, you kind of miraculously recovered. We've never seen any interaction. We have looked at we haven't excluded, quite a number of trials exclude neurodiversity because they think it moderates their effects. We've never seen a systematic effect of neurodiversity on above and beyond what we see there. In order for us to make a conclusion about that, you need to recruit from the very start. That should be the purpose of the study, you know. So we haven't had enough in each arm to look at a systematic effect or make a conclusion. Yeah.
And actually, there is a woman named Dr. Shar Goodwin who is...
Oh, yes. Yes, Shar, yes.
Yeah, she's actually doing a study right now on experiences of autistic women with breast cancer.
Yes.
So if anyone's interested in that,
Yes.
I think we've shared the details in our Facebook group.
Yes. It's the first of its kind, in fact.
Yeah, absolutely. Got a question down here.
Hi, thank you so much for such a great talk. And I'm coming here as a healthcare professional and to see you backing stuff up with science. And just to anyone in the room, the lady that was asking about nutrition, speak to somebody who utilises the evidence base, which takes me on to my next point about being your own advocate, and the first place you search is online.
Yeah.
And all of the stuff that goes along with that. But have you found that we're probably of the first of the generation that didn't have social media as a teenager? Do you think that this might be influencing distraction, attention, regardless of treatment or cognitive impairment from treatment or not?
So this is a really good question, and one that I think will be a focus of attention very soon. So we've just done a study, but this isn't in the context of cancer. We just wanted to see, you know, non-cancer and then maybe extend to cancer. We have seen that there is a relationship, and it's cross-sectional, so I can't promise any longitudinal effects, but it's the first study of its kind to look at time on like social media, but then by different platforms like Instagram, Facebook, etc., and impairments in attention control on a cognitive task. So there's more distractibility. You know, we have not published this paper. We need to replicate the results so that I'm convinced, and the sample size was only about 100, but still quite big for a, so there is a correlation with, I don't want to say which platform because it might not be fair. But yes, there is a contribution with distractibility. And I don't think there's any other study out there published to show this with you know, performance-wise. But there may be different moderators, you know. Maybe the effects would be greater, you know, taking forward on depression, not so much anxiety. We'll see.
All right, I think we've got time for one last question. So, Benita, I'm going to hand to you.
Hi, sorry, I just wanted to ask, I think you mentioned anxiety and depression and a link to reoccurrence, or did I get that wrong?
Yes.
Okay, so essentially the more anxious we are about reoccurrence.
Well, this study hadn't looked, I don't know if they'd included the fear of cancer recurrence measure, but this was across the board. Okay, so it might, I'm not saying it's the fear of cancer recurrence that increases anxiety and then leads to, you know, recurrence. One thing that should be absolutely clear is that none of this is our fault. So this can be very damaging to put people on a guilt trip. For example, as a child, I was a very anxious child. And I went through periods of depression. And I wanted to study anxiety, and I've always said this in my lectures, from when I was 12, because I wanted to know why I was so anxious. So, you know, people say, oh, did stress contribute to your breast cancer? Did that anxiety contribute to your breast cancer? I don't know if it did or not. You know, stress works in strange, weird and wonderful ways, you know, on your body. And there isn't a study that can document a direct link, as there is no study that says this causes breast cancer. You know, so these analyses, they're just analyses to make us aware of the vulnerabilities that we may be facing, right? So if we suffer anxiety, if we have fear of cancer recurrence, if we're depressed, the finger shouldn't be pointed at us. In fact, there's no point for pointing the finger at anyone. What we see is the result of an analysis that says, please guys, this population, which is increasing, needs psychological support. So we don't then turn this around and say, you know, just like nutrition, just like food, it wasn't my fault I don't have broccoli every day, you know, or the greens, or the kale, or I had that glass of wine every other day. I didn't, yeah, but, or maybe I did something. Anyway, so do you know what I mean? So, yeah, it's something to kind of, you know, to be proactive about rather than ruminating or being reactive. And this isn't the only study, you know, there are others as well, you know, the one that I showed you with the self-report health, distress and survival functions. So, but then we don't know, did socioeconomic status have an effect? Did age have an effect? Did type of treatment have an effect? We don't know, but we need to take note of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that's all we've got time for question-wise, but Naz has really kindly said that if anyone does have any more specific or maybe personal questions that you could connect, we could put them in touch with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Please do email me. My university email, yes. Yeah, because it's all, you know, protected.
Yeah. So if you would do come to one of us and we can put you in contact. But big round of applause again.
Thank you so much.